Greetings. This is our fifth after action report. Um, when we left last time, the group had just battled the Exile and his goblin bodyguards, and the party did indeed win. They were pretty injured, though. I think they'd sustained pretty good injuries across the board. I know that Father Grim was taken out, needed to make a death save, but he did, so he is still alive. Patrick Fowler was down to a handful of hit points. Even the mage was down to, in the teens, right? So a lot of folks took a lot of damage. Um, but now they're in a position they've defeated the Exile, but are still in his little reactor control room, in his lab, and so they're all so some amount of activity starts. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Jeez. Okay. um, Lord Vincent starts checking the equipment. He is he is a mechanical sort of mini genius. So he's checking equipment. Um, Avery checks the escape hatch that the Exile was trying to escape down. Lance, because he took so much fire damage, I made him roll a gear check. And we'll talk about that. So what a gear check is in the game, items have durability, and it typically ranges from like +2 to -2. And what we do, but we don't actually track damage to equipment. So I've actually tried a bunch of systems like that, and it's a lot of hassle for little games. Instead, what we do now is this. On certain roles, you can get a gear check, typically in combat, but I also do occasionally enforce it on skill checks and so on, if you know if it warrants. If so, remember in Roombearer that all the dice rolls are opposed. The GM rolls a d12 behind the screen. You roll a d12. You add that to your skill. The GM adds that to the difficulty. Whoever's higher wins. The person who's acting wins all ties. But if the GM rolls a 12 or you roll a 1, then the GM can tell you, hey, you take a gear check. And what a gear check is, it's an abstract, it's a number of checks you have on your sheet, and you accumulate them over time. So in combat, you roll a couple ones in combat, you have 2 gear checks. You're trying to climb a slope and the GM rolls a 12 against you, maybe you have a 3rd gear check. At some point during a dramatic moment, no, those gear checks, let's hold off 1 second, can be repaired. Characters that have certain skills, certain professions, can take a repair kit during camp and repair your stuff, erasing those gear checks. But if you do have them, and a moment comes up where the GM's like, this might be interesting or increase the tension or whatever, he can make you roll a gear check. And what that is you roll a d12, and if you roll less than or equal to the number of gear checks you have, the GM can break a piece of your equipment. And it could be any number of things. So typically in combat, maybe it's your shield or your sword or piece of armor. Maybe you're climbing something and it's a rope, or a strap on your pack comes loose, something of that nature. Typically, now what happens as soon as you roll it, whether you succeed or fail, you get to erase all of the checks on your sheet and you're down to 0 again. And then you have to accumulate them again. And so it's sort of a weird abstract way to have durability for items and gear and repair, and it be meaningful, because no one wants to have 2 or 3 of these on a sheet when you're going into a fight, because then you're sort of, begging, you are tempting fate at that point. So it does help the group to have someone with repair and to keep your stuff cleaned and ready. So as Lance took all this damage with the fire, I made him roll a gear check, and he rolled a 1. His helmet was damaged by all the fire bombs, and just the straps were just gone, and he needed to look for a new helmet. So he was searching the goblins for one and found one that sort of fit. Now, goblin equipment does not have good durability at all, of course. And indeed, what happens is whatever the durability of the item is, you add or subtract it from the die roll. So a minus means your stuff is more likely to break. If I say, okay, I'm going to check your sword, what is it? And you say it's -1, and you have to subtract 1 from the D12. If I say I'm going to check your pack, what is it? And you say, oh, it's +1. It's finely made. So then you increase the die roll by 1, thus making it less likely that it breaks. So anyway, as Lance is doing that, he looks back toward the door, realizes that Alice is missing, and he sees the back of a goblin fleeing. So the goblins have snuck while the party was busy tending their wounds, etc. The goblins snuck up and snatched the Waterbearer and dragged her back through the lab. Party immediately springs into action and chases them down. We make a couple rolls, but what happens is the goblins get sort of stuck where the giant gaunt gargoyle body guy is dead in the first room. And as they're trying to get over that, the party catches up with them. One of the goblins immediately grabs Alice, holds the knife up to her throat, says, "We have the girl. You thought you won. You have not won. Haha," right? He gives them a little spiel. Now, what I'm hoping is that if the goblins get to the door, or they can delay the party enough, allowing reinforcements to come. And so that makes this situation a lot more dire. Sister Fiona she's not having any of this. She looks at me and just goes, I pull my bow and shoot him. And I'm like, well, she has cover. I'm behind Alice. And she's like, yeah, I pull up and shoot him. And she does. So and I give her we're not even into combat. She's like, instant. It is with no hesitation. I pull up and shoot him. I'm like, cover? Yep. Boom. And she hits him anyway. And she plugs him pretty hard. She does a wound. That's enough for him to flinch. Alice sort of, bops him with the staff, escapes, but now she is surrounded by 5 goblins. And she's going to have to get through that to get to the party. But now the rest of the party springs into action. And, and it's pretty brutal. Like who the heck? I think it was... Lance immediately steps up because he's up in front. Now, mind you, not all the party's going because Father Grimm is still sitting in a pool of his own blood. There's a bunch of injured. But immediately, Lance steps up, hits a guy, wounds him, staggers him. He stumbles back. Lance takes another shot and knocks him down. Patrick Fowler charges, hits another goblin for like 17 points, which is a big wound, drops him. Now that the goblin is uncovered by the Waterbearer Alice, Sister Fiona shoots a third goblin and drops him. And immediately they're down from 5 to 2, and they just flee. So, now don't get me wrong. I did not expect that my group would get into a long parlay with the group of 5 goblins. That's sort of not... the sister's style for sure, and she's in charge of Alice primarily, but I had hoped that it at least gave them pause, right? That the goblin holding up and the knife to Alice gave him just enough pause to maybe they would talk a little bit and I could sit there and count a few rounds and see what was coming. That didn't work. And I should have known that. I should have... I have some bloodthirsty religious folk in this party. In any case, someone goes and checks to see if this has if the goblins have are coming or whatever. What they see is not that the goblins are imminently coming, but that they don't have a great deal of time because Sogtor's ruse has played out. Like they can see the fires over in the goblin, the west side of the goblin villages. And they can see that Sogtor's men are mostly in retreat and being pursued. And indeed, some of the goblins that are fighting over in the west are now heading across the bridge. That means they don't have a great deal of time. So they immediately duck back into the lab and get to work. Lord Vincent, who, like I said, is sort of a mechanical genius, starts using his mechanic skill to determine the mechanism of this alchemical, right? So there's these cauldrons and there's this giant heating reactor. And he has noticed some piping and steam works in this thing and thinks, if I can close some steam valves, can I get this thing to blow? So he starts working on that. In the meantime, Percy, the thief, the crow thief, uses his trap skill. And you're in an alchemy place, and there's a lot of flammable stuff, and there's some ropes and twine. So he actually starts to set up. He makes makeshift wicks by soaking ropes in oil and gas, flammable liquid. And he's like, well, I can get a candle to burn X amount. That'll give us about 10 minutes. Once this hits, boom, we're going to go over here, catch this whole thing on fire. He sets up about 4 traps like that, 4 oily fire traps around some of the alchemical stuff, right? In hopes to maybe catch a couple flammable bits. He doesn't know much about alchemy other than poisons. I'm drinking from my wife's Hello Kitty mug, so if you noticed that. Just picked it off the shelf. She has a couple, so the statistical chance of me picking one, um, why I don't know. Ask my kids. So 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 they've set this thing up, and they have about 10 or so minutes. Fiona's using magic and medical skill to heal as many people as she possibly can. Now, medical skill takes about 5 minutes to use, so that gives her 2 attempts. Her magic's much quicker, and so she healing words a few of the characters um, as best she can. It still leaves the party. So healing is not super powerful in the game. Um, it gets more powerful over time as time goes on with in terms of characters with spells and so on. But you know, you might heal a D like her first tier healing spell heals a D4 plus 1. It's not terrible, but it's not great, and it's not going to get through most wounds just because. Um, so we still have characters that are injured. The herbalist also has a couple items that he can use to give a D4 back, and so you're giving characters 1 to 2 D4, early on, and that's about what you get. And the rest has to heal naturally, or you need to see a doctor, an honest to God physician, or you need a potion, alchemy, um, and you know that's about where they're at. Now, there's other ways to get rid of some damage. We'll talk about this when we talk about the rules. One other thing is a lot of the damage, unless it's a wound and carries an effect with it, you can shake it off, meaning you roll your toughness effect die and you just erase that much injury at the end of a fight. So the party is better than they were, but they are still nowhere in good fighting condition. They don't want to fight 20 goblins now. That would not go well for them. Nonetheless, I don't think they're going to. Right? They're quickly setting this place up to hopefully blow. They're going to blow out the boiler. They're going to set this place on alchemical fire. In the meantime, characters are searching for valuables while this is being done. In the 10 minutes they have, they find the alchemist has 2 wicked goblin daggers. So goblin stuff is crappy typically, but it does have a bleed component. So anytime you do any damage with it, it might bleed someone. And these weapons they give to Percy in case they are interesting in any way. And I think they might be to him because they do reasonable damage and they'll have bleed on them. And so he'll be able to, if he hits you, potentially make you take more damage over time. They find 4 different potions of 4 different colors, 150 unknown coins, with some symbols like a head on one side and like some kind of weird eye symbol on the other side, and an alchemy book. They can't read it or decipher it yet. It's in Goblin and has like symbols, but they do know an alchemist back in town. They figure, hey, we'll take it. They set this all up and then escape out the escape hatch. Oh, Avery did check the escape hatch, by the way. It did go down to the north of to the river, so all the way down the 100 foot to the river, dumps out at the river north of where the lab is and where the goblin village is. So they take the escape hatch. In the meantime, goblins are coming through the front door. The whole place goes up. Boom. They succeed and move on. But there's goblin patrols throughout the night, and so we do make them roll like their scouting checks to keep hidden and not have to engage the goblins. They succeed in that and end up north, upriver. Well, not yet. So they end up, here or whatever. I can't really ping it, but right here, they end up here. And everyone's exhausted. It's dawn and a perfect time and a perfect place to do the ritual. So Waterbearer, Alice, and Sister Fiona head up out of sight of the others. And the sister is going to cast a heal or two. And so she casts a spell called Estra's Aegis, which gives her temporary hit points. So she gives her like 5 temporary hit points to start the ritual off, because they do know, a Waterbearer Alice has told them this ritual is effectively blood to water. So Alice is going to bleed. That will turn into holy water. That will go into the river. This is just a really, really powerful version of that spell, but it will bleed Alice. So, and how it works and what I told them is, well, Alice has so many hit points. I think she has like 30, something like that. She's actually, yeah, she has 31. She's reasonably tough. Her toughness actually is decent. Her power is good. Her muscle's crappy, but her stats actually give her about 31 hit points. I should have given her less because she's small, and I should have accounted for that. But they do pick these. They do pick these special priestesses for this purpose. So I figured maybe it's not out of the realm of reason that she's tougher than your average 13-year-old. Nonetheless, what she's going to do is she's going to go through the tiers. Tier 1, she'll take a d6 hit points. Tier 2, she'll take 2d6. Tier 3, she'll take 3d6. Tier 4, 4d6. At that point, she will have taken 10d6 hit points, and that's 35 on average. What I told them was that if she got to Tier 4, she would have a chance to overcome the alchemy lab dumping poisons into the water. Tier 5 would be almost certainty to even without finishing the lab. But Tier 5, 15 dice, I don't think Alice can do that. She would have to have a lot more healing or a lot more hit points or a lot more healing at her disposal. And Sister Fiona is only a Tier 1, a practitioner of the Sacred Falls of Estra. She has her healing spells are minor. She has Ease Pain, which can give an extra temporary hit point. But again, we're not... And ease her pain. So actually make it less likely that she will pass out or, right, that kind of thing. So they prepare the sister and Alice. And she does get the 4 dice. Now, keep in mind, the alchemy lab is gone. They've blown it to off the side of the mountain there. Certainly, there's chemicals and stuff, which residue, which would have to clear out, but there's not this continuous befoulment of the water. And so they do get she gets Tier 4, and I feel that that's reasonable enough. And what I tell them is, well, given that you destroyed the lab and got to Tier 4, the water rises up in a white mystical fire, engulfing the river for miles. I mean, they're up in the mountains, so they can actually see somewhat down. They can see it down here in the valley. The white fire and the curtains of light that rise up almost like an aurora. All the way down river, as far as they can tell. They can't. I mean, they can't see forever, but they can see some distance. And then Waterbearer Alice passes out. she 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 drops. Because she's done. She's literally down to, her last couple hit points effectively in doing that. So she could take the 10 dice with Alice's help. That last yeah, that last roll just was high, and it took it almost all out of her. So she passes out from blood loss. The sister brings her to Father Grimm. Father Grimm, it's a new day. He actually has a prayer which allows him to carry an unconscious, like a victim of infinitely. Like he has literally a prayer which allows him to carry the wounded, um, without rest, without fail, kind of. Even though he himself has a handful of hit points at best and has bled most of his blood, by praying to the saints, he can now carry her for whatever distance. So he does indeed do that. The party heads back down. Before they get too far, they find Sogtor and his men, and Sogtor, they get the story from Sogtor, who says, "Yeah, I did lose a couple men. They mostly avoided battle, but he did lose a couple men. They had to flee ultimately and did evade pursuit. Um, the exiles goblins, once they saw the mystical fire, scattered into the mountains. Once they saw the lab blew up too, and then the mystical fire came in the morning. They've scattered. Sogtor will have to hunt them down, or leave them be, but he's currently licking his wounds pretty much as well. Avery asks about the coins. I think Sogtor tells them that goblins trade these coins. These are goblin coins, but they're not really. They are coins from before, as he said, and the goblins mine them from sites from before. The party does think it's like maybe ancient coins, because there's some of those markings bear striking resemblance to stuff that the church uses for Stratus. They don't have any alchemists, so they don't know exactly. It seems silver. The coins are silver-ish, right? But they're not exact, and they're similar size to their silver coins, but not similar weight. A little bit lighter. Magnus wants to talk to the goblins and trade with them, and that's great. Sogtor's like, "Look, I'm no trader. I can't. I don't make deals. I'm a warrior. What I will do is I will tell my chiefs that the humans in Dawn's Hope are okay, but I would warn you to stay east of this river, which they call the Snake River. The goblins do." So I thought that was sort of an interesting boundary, right? So the goblins are here somewhere to the west of the Snake River. They warn the humans to stay to the east. And that'll set up maybe some future conflicts, right? As humans naturally travel westward, we spread like virus, right? The prospectors and trappers are going to go into those hills. All it takes is gold to be found in the Snake River, and that's it, right? Gold color in the Snake River, and we're done. And then we can have that friction. So yeah, he's like, "Yeah, I can't do anything for you, Magnus, um, but I'll tell my chiefs to that the humans are okay and they helped us out. I would suggest you stay east of that river so that you don't anger the tribes." And then he calls Magnus Ugados, which in Goblin he says means guard who sleeps. And so the Goblin language is sort of a weird meme language, right? So it's very much like German in that it's very compound words. They jam words together to make new words. But the Goblin language goes a step sort of beyond that, in that, those words' meanings will grow over time. Like that one word will have more and more meaning over time. Um, it might either describe more aspects of Magnus's character. It might allude to the fact that he's a crow shaman, which he isn't, but the goblins still sort of think he is. Um, it might allude to other deeds that he has or whatever, right? But those words, his word, his name will, heck, it might come down and become a whole story, right? I mean, much like a word like uh, uh, Don Quixote and Quixotic, right? Oh, you are tilting at windmills. You are on this bogus quest that is doomed. Um, that word can take meaning in goblins, but that does that sort of like weirdly so. It's a viral language for them. So, um, so at that point, the party heads back, and we are going to end this one early. I just wanted to get through the adventure portion, and when we will talk next after action report on what happens in the town. And there's a bunch in the town, but it's fairly scattered, right? It's a bunch of characters having their little moments with other characters or gathering rumors or whatever, right? So we have a lot to cover there too, and I wanted to just get through the adventure part. So that's it. The exile is defeated. The river is saved. The party is returning to Dawn's Hope, hopefully to a Dawn's Hope that has not been seriously damaged by this pollution. So that is it. Thank you very much for indulging me. And I hope you like the video. If you do, please like the video. And I will talk to you all later.